We have been through our study of Mother's framework for the Tapasya of beauty and the Tapasya of power. And now she takes up the Tapasya of knowledge. And the overall form of this Tapasya, she has concentrated on its most material, most accessible aspect, and that is speech. There's a very interesting statement attributed to Swami Vivekananda, which goes something like this: watch your thoughts, for they become your speech. Watch your speech, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, for they become your character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. There's a very clear sequence of results emerging all from our thoughts, which are the most subtle. The speech is where the thought takes visible form. From there, the visible form turns into dynamic action, changing circumstances. The repeated pattern of how we act on circumstances becomes a habit, and the habit now becomes its own self-fulfilling destiny. But in this whole chain, the key is right at the origin, in the layer which is most intangible in our thoughts. And if the whole Tapasya of knowledge, the mother had concentrated on the thoughts, it would not have been accessible for everybody. By concentrating on the portion where the thought takes form, it allows us to have some grasp over this whole thing. And the chain follows after. And that's why in brackets, there is a subtitle to this theme, Tapasya of Knowledge. In brackets, she puts control of speech. And those of you who have read the text will see that primarily it teaches us how to reduce unnecessary speech, how to give the speech a certain form, focus and force, and so on. But you will also notice that implied in this control of speech, and as a result of the control of speech, is the automatic control of thought. And so she has given, by a very practical starting point, a result which is profound. And the ultimate outcome of the Tapasya of knowledge, she describes as the establishment in the being of the mind of light or Gnostic consciousness, whose expression will have the creative power of the word. Obviously, this is not just a question of ordinary speech. It has to do with the change in the consciousness of the mind, the way the mind functions itself. So clearly the whole text is pointing to a discipline where there is a mind mastery. That's why it's Tapasya of knowledge. But not only mind mastery, but a purification and a transformation of the mind, that it becomes a vehicle for a higher spiritual truth consciousness, Gnostic consciousness. And so, since most of you have already read the text, I would like to focus more on the link between the speech and mind and how we can directly apply this very guideline, this very framework that the Mother gives us to the control of the thoughts themselves, and then further develop the possibilities of the mind along the directions she has already described here. She speaks of how the mental austerity immediately brings to the mind long meditations leading to control of thought and culminating inner silence. This control, and then she says that, well, this is well known, so it doesn't need dwelling, and then she moves on to the speech. But this control of thought culminating in inner silence is something which is so valued in all spiritual traditions, and there's a reason for that. Sri Aurobindo explains in the Synthesis of Yoga that there are two kinds of knowledge. There is a knowledge which is more tangible, accessible, informational, measurable. and which is manipulated by the intellect in a rational framework. But behind that, there is a deeper and more profound knowledge which we would normally characterize as wisdom. It's not just wisdom, it's a kind of a profound experience where you hold the knowledge as an experience, as a living force without words, even without thoughts. And it is from here that our thoughts and words emerge. So we've all had this experience that you want to say something very important, and then as you move to saying it, you realize that the words you're going to use are inadequate. And you pause and you say, wait, let me find the right words. At that point, you're holding something, you know what you want to say, but you don't have the right words for it. The same thing happens when you're translating from one language to another. You have read something, and do this as an exercise. Take a line from Savitri, absorb the full import of it, and then try to translate it into your mother tongue or any other language that you know well enough. And then you'll see the struggle you have. You rearrange words, you find the right word, and still you're not satisfied. But all the while you know exactly what you want to say, but the words are inadequate. So you can have a knowledge held in form of thought completely without words. And it's possible to train yourself to think on this level, wordlessly. Mother observes how in our man is the first animal on earth, she says, to be able to use articulate sounds. She doesn't make us very different from animals. We just happen to be the first animal that can speak. And then she discusses 4 stages of how even this power of speech grows. So the first stage, she says that those who have a weak mental power, they need to use more speech. Because that's something tangible, material, accessible. And he says the most primitive and uneducated people who can't think unless they speak, they need to start talking, and that's how they feel they're thinking. But a slightly superior level, educated people but whose mental power is weak, for them, she says, they do not know what they want to say until they say it. So they start speaking and then they need to repeat what they're saying 2 or 3 times until they get it right. And then they know this is what I wanted to say. And then some people prepare beforehand what they want to say and they go very smoothly until something comes in the way and they have to improvise, and then they start stuttering. And lastly, there are born orators who are master of the spoken word. They find the spontaneous words. But with all of this training of the speech faculty, it's still coming into the category of idle talk. To take it to a level which is more meaningful, you have to start selecting your words, dropping unnecessary words and making precisely the use of the word you need. Now at this point, you realize there is a layer where you can know without words, and the words are a tool by which you articulate. I had a mathematics teacher. He was as much a yogi as a mathematician, and he was one of the very famous mathematicians, senior mathematicians of India. And he lived in the ashram through most of his later years. And he would teach us spiritual things through mathematics, intentionally, very consciously. But that's something to share on another occasion. But he would repeatedly say, mathematics is a language. What you want to say has to be articulated in this language, precisely and completely, so that somebody else receiving this can understand precisely and completely what you want to say. And the circuit is complete only when it goes all the way through to the other person precisely and completely. The intermediary is this language, mathematics. And he would say, mathematics is the most complete and precise language. I'm giving this example because I want to generalize this to all languages and to all use of speech. That we should strive to use speech in this way. That we use it as a tool to communicate precisely and completely. And you see this tremendous power in Sri Aurobindo's writings. Each word, each comma is crafted to perfection. You could just move one comma out, change one word slightly, and the meaning changes completely. And everything is beautifully interdependent, arranged in layers and structures and substructures and sub-substructures, holding the whole structure of the knowledge in the structure of the sentence. And that's the reason why he has sometimes such complex sentences. And you couldn't say it in a more condensed way. He has already condensed it to the maximum. If you try to say it differently, you'll find you have to expand and you have to repeat and you have to reconnect and you miss some threads and internal connections. It's so beautiful. It's a masterpiece, just as a sculpture, as a piece of architecture, linguistically. And of course, as a perfect expression in thought of something that is known and held without thought and without word. And when you read Sri Aurobindo, you are as if forced to rise to this level of awareness and learn to handle knowledge on this level. One can train oneself to be like this. The mother speaks of cultivating this power to think without words and then to think without thoughts at the level of essential ideas, and then even to abstract from there at the level of pure concept. And from there, one more step is pure experience. You think, or rather you cognize with experience. Each experience can articulate through various concepts, each concept through various ideas, each idea through various thoughts, each thought through various words. It's as if you have gone up several levels. The vocabulary we use in meta levels, that is one level higher, to a level of abstraction where you hold pure knowledge, even on an essential formless level. If you can tap into this, if you can develop this faculty, this power, you will find the knowledge that is held is so complete in a single grasp, in a single vision, everything is held together like that. When Sri Aurobindo wrote in the Arya, in the beginning he had also others writing and then they left. At that point, he alone was writing the whole text of the Arya, 64 pages every month. And he was writing 6 books at a time. 1 chapter each in parallel. So let's say book 1, chapter 5, book 2, chapter 5, book 3, chapter 5, book 4, chapter 5, book 6 books, and parallelly each month the next chapter. And if you read each book, there is a complete continuity. Nowhere he had notes. Nowhere he sat down and fumbled and thought, edited, re-edited as most authors would do. He sat at the typewriter and wrote out the chapter without hesitation, without pause, completely. Switched to the next book, finished its chapter, and so on. I say, what an extraordinary genius. Yes, of course. That's the word we use to describe this capacity. But what is this capacity? He held that whole knowledge in a single sweep of vision. And each book was a passage, an aspect of the knowledge cut out. And he saw it before him. He saw where he had gone and what he wanted to say. And articulated it perfectly. And each chapter begins with a paragraph that summarizes the previous chapter and ends in a paragraph that points to the essence of the next chapter. It's all there, perfectly crafted. Because the knowledge was held in this way. Vast, comprehensive, but essentially oneness in the vision. So no need for notes. And it's possible for us to rise to this level. And in these small steps. And it begins with this skill of quieting the mind, for which the first step we can take in controlling speech. So Sri Aurobindo describes in the Synthesis of Yoga 2 levels of knowledge, this more mundane level, what we call knowledge in a usual human interaction, and then this more essential level where knowledge is held in some kind of an essential experience. And he says, when we speak in spiritual terms of knowledge, capital K, we mean this higher domain of knowledge. And when we speak of knowledge of the divine, knowledge of the absolute, even if you speak of knowledge of the universe, we mean it in this way. And so for that, there are two steps necessary. First step of preparing the mind, and then second step of actually entering that experience. And it is only in that level that you can know truly the universe or the origin of the universe, because that is on that level. You can only know it on its own level. In fact, every genius, whether scientist or musician or artist or whatever, consciously or unconsciously taps into this domain a little bit, which makes him the genius. If you didn't have access to this, you wouldn't be genius, period. On the other hand, when you begin to have access to this, your genius potential begins to unfold. So implied in this is the idea that through a yogic process, the genius potential in all of us can be awakened and can be made visible and expressed. And all of us, without exception. Some more, some less, some in this line, some in another line. That's fine. So for this, especially the last part of the access to this higher knowledge, the preparation needed is of training the mind to become silent. Ideally even silent at will. And you'll see so much of this control of speech is pointing towards this capacity. And when the mind can be taught to become silent, it can turn up to its own higher powers and faculties of knowledge, and those begin to settle and form themselves in the mind, and your whole mind is as if filled with light. And the way you think changes. So as a first step, you observe that our thinking is mostly linear. This thought leads by association to another thought, which leads to another thought, which leads to another thought. And generally, if we find the associations to be random, our rational faculty comes in, corrects it, sequences it, or makes some linking points, and then we have a logical chain of development of thought. Right? But if at any point somebody comes and questions this logic, well, you have to bypass that stumbling block and create another chain around it. But when your mind becomes quiet, rather than thinking out linearly, you begin to see the lines of logic, lines of thought. And you see not just this one, but also that bypass which is possible, and another bypass, and another variation, like threads flowing, and all leading to that point to which you want to go, or perhaps to other points. You see it. You don't have to think out in order to know. You already know, and then you can use the thought and the word to describe what you already see and what you know. So there is a kind of Sri Aurobindo uses this word mass ideation. You look at a situation and you can see all the different angles involved. And this is just by making your mind quiet, silent at will if possible. And then this power of seeing grows until you are able to see more deeply, more richly, more widely. Until at some point, the seeing itself is felt like an identity, a touch, a contact. I see this, but I also feel it. I feel it because I feel it like a part of myself. And this aspect of feeling and knowing by feeling an identity, by a contact with it, grows more until what you see is first felt and then seen. And at that point, what you know is your experience in the knowing, which then you're describing. Now, if I had to ask you to describe what you feel, remember, let's say, a beautiful experience that you had. Pick any. Doesn't matter how important or less important. Just any beautiful experience. And then if I ask you to describe it, observe what happens in your mind. The experience itself is there, but when you have to describe it, when you have to give it words, where shall I start? First you start hovering around the experience. What will be your starting point? Shall I say this first or shall I say that first? And then your mind automatically sifts and to pick up some major aspect of it, around which other things will cluster. And you begin with that as a starting point. And then you somehow try to cluster in all the associated pieces. And as you're narrating, you say, oh yeah, I missed this one, this was also important. And you bring in a piece which was lost. But all of this is in the articulation of the experience. The experience itself you already have. And you're only trying to match the words to the experience. Inadequately perhaps. Because they somehow can never match fully. They can never express fully what you have already in that identity. So it is in this way that one begins to know, and it is this kind of knowing which we call intuitive knowledge. The nature of intuitive knowledge is that you already are what you know. And the beauty of this kind of knowledge is, it doesn't mean that you have to have had it already. You can receive it now as a knowledge, as an insight, but what is received is an experience where you already are what you know. And then you articulate. And that's when you find, in the very act of expressing, you are what you know, and so you have grown in receiving this knowledge. This is what we call inspired speech or inspiration, where something comes in which you didn't have before, which you didn't know before. I have just now received it, I have become and experienced it, and then I express it. It's like a spiritual download of new knowledge. You see this idea represented in a somewhat superficial way in this movie, The Matrix. You've all seen the movie, I hope. It's worth seeing because of the deep symbolism it carries. And there one of these characters says, I need to fly this helicopter. Please download the capacity, the programming for flying the helicopter. And the person at the other end downloads programming, and then this fellow sits and flies it like an expert. But in fact, such a thing is possible when we begin to receive intuitive knowledge. And it's in this way I mentioned, I think on the first day, this incident with Swami Vivekananda, where he took a gun and shot accurately. Each shot was a perfect hit. And they asked him, how did you do it? You must have practiced long. He said, no, it's the first time I picked up the gun. When one has access to the intuition, and especially when the intuition can come down into the body consciousness, it can actually make your body move as if you have the full knowledge and experience in the body consciousness. And so somebody who has absolutely no skill in a particular craft can receive that knowledge and in the state of intuition, inspiration, perfectly express that knowledge. You see now what we mean by true knowledge. True knowledge is that which you are in your experience. All the rest is only layers of expression or superficial forms. And so in the spiritual domain, when we speak of knowledge, capital K, this is what we are meaning. And so coming back to the point here, the first requirement for training this is to be able to make the mind silent. At least to make it quiet. To be able to make it quiet, you must be able to control your thoughts. And so the chain begins. Control of speech, leading to control of thoughts, leading to capacity to quiet your thoughts at will, leading to making the mind used to being quiet, and then making it completely silent. And the normal process of things, it can take a long time. That's why she says, brings to mind long meditations leading to all this. It's a long process, and there are people who spend sometimes years. But there are easier ways, and there are more difficult ways. All of those will work, but some are more easy, some are more difficult. In this yoga, in particular, we use this potentiality of receiving directly that power or that capacity. And this is the capacity where the divine gifts it to you, so to say, or you receive it directly. And the best, easiest way for this is simply to become conscious of the mind, open the mind's awareness with an aspiration, and invoke peace to settle. And if you remain like this for a while, after a while you begin to feel something settling, and you feel a peace, and your mind becomes quiet. But you still have to train yourself, you have to habituate yourself to be able to stay in that. Otherwise your being becomes a little restless, you're not used to it. It's a new experience, it's too new still. So Champaklalji asked this question to Sri Aurobindo. Well, after all, when the spiritual experience comes to me, it will come and I will have it. So what's the point of meditation? And precisely Sri Aurobindo says it's because by regular meditation you acclimatize yourself to receive and to hold. You create that fertile receptive ground. If you have not done that, a beautiful experience may come. For a moment you're exalted, you have whatever it is you seek, and then it passes, you cannot contain it, or it destabilizes the system and you have to spill it, etc. But the regular practice is meant to acclimatize. So let's look at it very practically here, how we would do it. And I would suggest as a practice that everybody reserve 5 or 10 minutes every day. Put it in your routine, otherwise it never happens. Don't think of, I will do when I have time. That will never happen, you never have time. You don't say that to your food. You don't say, I will eat when I have time. Because eventually the stomach pulls you through the pains. So you don't say, I will shower when I have time. Okay, there are days when you have to skip it, but otherwise you put it in a routine, and as long as it's in the routine, you can squeeze the time, make it less, have a quick shower or a long shower, but you still have it. So we have to slot it somewhere, and I would suggest you do it just after your shower. When you're fresh, before you have entered the day, you're still in your room, perhaps in your personal space, that would be the best time. And the act of bathing has also the effect of purifying, washing out clutter of thoughts and junk in the consciousness, or the inertia of the night sleep. So it's the best time to catch at that moment. And then you sit down. Try to isolate as far as possible from all distractions. That means if you have a mobile phone that might ring, put it on silent, take the phone off the hook, close the doors, windows, so that you have minimum of physical sounds distracting you. Strong smells, if you find them distracting, avoid that. Otherwise, you might use a light incense if it helps to create a mood. Smells are very powerful tools. You must recognize that all these rituals which were used in traditional systems or in ancient times had a very profound meaning. They were not trivially given, and when they're used consciously, they can have a powerful impact. And the sense of smell is considered to be the most ancient of our instincts, and it connects from the nose straight to the core of the brain. What you smell hits straight inside the brain and modifies the entire state of the brain working. I'm not speaking of mind yet, but even the brain becoming quiet is helpful to the mind, for the mind to become quiet. So certain smells you will find soothing. Certain smells you will find helpful for a state of relaxation and concentration. Pick what you find helpful. Light a small incense, not too much smoke, or just put a piece of camphor or a light perfume which you find supportive, not distracting, or nothing at all, just keep it plain. These things will help to create a mood. I suggest not to use music. Concentrating with music is useful when you find your thoughts wandering, when your basic discipline of the mind's concentration has not been developed. But otherwise, generally it's distracting unless the music is intended for a purpose. Then your concentration is on the music and the mood that it leads to. When, for example, you listen to mother's music, mother's organ music, there's a particular purpose, something that the music brings to you. And so you're concentrating on the music and using it as a vehicle. But otherwise, for these purposes, when you want to quiet the mind and all, avoid any sounds. Silence is much better. And then there are several starting points. The first easiest starting point would be a hook in the body. Like Mata has given here, the control of speech. Well, here we will go directly to something which is the breath. The breath is the one function, one of the very few functions in the body, which is at the same time automatic and at the same time consciously controllable. And since it is also through the breath that the life energy is drawn, control of the breath gives control of life energy, which gives control of the agitated state of life energy which modifies the mind. So there's a whole chain there. There's a logic to it. And what we do as a first step is make the breath slow and deep. And when the breath slows down, you will find your emotions and your thoughts slow down. As your breath becomes deep, your emotions and your thoughts become quiet, automatically, effortlessly. So your focus is only on the breath, but the ripple effect is on the emotions and the thoughts. Let's do this as an exercise. You can keep your eyes open if you like, but then keep them neutrally looking somewhere towards the ground, not looking at anything, but just neutral, and or close them if you find that helpful. But put your attention on the breath, observe the breath and feel the air as it enters from the nostrils, goes up through the nose and down through the throat, as far as you can feel into the lungs and then back all the way out. And as you observe the breath, slow it down and deepen it. Breathe in slow and deep, following the airflow with sensation. And you see automatically your emotions are relaxed, your mind is relaxed, perhaps even quiet. Of course, thoughts come and go, but they are not so agitated, they are not so chaotic. The two variations you can make to this now, as you breathe in, draw the breath up into the head. Try to feel the air flowing up the nose into the head. Filling the head, and then breathe out from there. As if you're breathing not into the lungs but into the brain. And the whole brain region is activated by the freshness of the breath that comes in. And then let your awareness remain in the region of the brain, head, around the head, just becoming aware of the quietness, enjoying the quietness. Let the attention on the breath drop and just keep your attention on the brain region, head region, around the head region. Let the breath continue on its own, put your attention here and remain aware, simply aware. You may notice already perhaps that there are no particular thoughts. You can have thoughts, but otherwise they don't seem to happen all the time automatically. There are no chains of associations. You're simply aware. Aware of your own mind, aware of your own mind's awareness. And it feels good. Enjoy it. Remain in this. Notice most of your awareness is centered in the brain region and just around the head, around that region. And as you're aware of this, gently turn this awareness upwards, as if opening to something above the head. And let the top of your head awareness open out completely, opening up to the vastness above. As if opening to a vast ocean of peace above. And let your mind awareness open out completely and widen in that vastness above. Perhaps you feel that peace like a dense presence above the head, vast, ocean-like. Or you just feel something, presence or peace just above. In whatever way you feel it, gently let it settle. Let it settle to come down, settle at the top of the head. Like a dense, vast presence or peace, slowly settling at the top of the head. Perhaps you feel a gentle pressure at the top. And let it slowly now spread and settle into the region of your head, the region of your brain, around, and spread downwards like a dense, cooling, soothing, liquid peace, slowly filling your head, settling in your brain. Filling and surrounding your brain. And then slowly extending downwards, spreading through the entire head. Until it slowly spreads all the way down to the neck, filling and surrounding the neck. Flows down to fill your chest, shoulders and chest. Gentle, soothing, perhaps cooling sensation of dense liquid peace. Spreading through your shoulders into your chest. And you notice at this point that your mind is absolutely silent, effortlessly. Perhaps you don't even have the thought that you're thinking. You're just aware that you're not thinking. And this is good. Enjoy this state. Allow your mind to get habituated to this. Let your body enjoy this state also. And now very slowly, you can allow your eyes to open but remain in this state as far as possible. Don't let the sight of things in front of you distract you. Just remain aware of this state of stillness, silence. And notice not only it fills your head and surrounds your head, but it extends into the whole room. The whole room is filled as if with this peace, this silence. And let your attention dwell on this vast silence and peace that fills the room, fills your head. And now in your awareness, let the limits of this room and its walls dissolve. And become aware that this silence and the peace extends around into the whole universe. Just remain aware of that. and enjoy this sense of wideness, wide silence, wide peace, thoughtless awareness, but which is very alert, very conscious. If you want, you can think about something, but you notice if you choose to think, your thoughts are not cluttered. You're thinking of what you want to think, and if you choose not to think, your mind lapses back into silence without effort. And it's possible at this point, once you have allowed the silence and peace to settle in you, it's possible for you to get up and do a simple activity. Pick up a piece of cloth, wipe the table. Any activity which does not involve communication of speech or writing, you will find you can do quite easily. Later you will find you can even speak or write, keeping this state of silence in the mind. And it's fun. If you write poetry, the words will flow through more easily. Those of you who have your eyes closed, perhaps you can open them now and try to retain that state. You notice that what settles from above as peace is different from silence. It brings silence where it touches. Silence is absence of activity, absence of noise. But peace is a positive power. It can be there even when you are in activity, even when you have thought. It naturally brings silence. The peace is an active power of the self. It's the power of the spiritual consciousness. And that's why it is something which descends from above. When it fills your brain, when it fills your head, it makes the thoughts silent. When it fills your heart, it makes your emotions silent. When it fills the rest of your body, you will feel in your body and in your nerves a stillness. And in that stillness, even a power. We spoke of static power yesterday. What you feel settling brings with it a certain quality of power. That there's something within unshakable. It feels as if when it is strong, it feels as if you can be in the marketplace and nothing will shake you. And you have to cultivate, train your body, emotions and mind to hold this and get used to this. And everything else will naturally follow if this foundation has been set well. And it takes 5 or 10 minutes perhaps. But it should be a 5 or 10 minutes where you are not thinking of what you have to do next. 10 minutes that you are free from distractions. And afterwards you get up, try to maintain this state as you enter your day's activities, and thereafter, whenever possible, recall this state, center yourself and try to become aware of it. What will happen as you enter activity, perhaps your mind will start thinking, but the thoughts are on the surface. Behind the thoughts will still be the stillness and peace. And if you pause for a moment, perhaps you close your eyes, feel, recall the experience. Remember, it's not a memory, it's an experience that you recall. You will find the peace is just behind. And you will feel it again and you can bring it forward again. And then re-enter your work. So during the rest of the day, frequently, especially in the beginning of the day while it's still fresh, reconnect frequently. And then you'll find the connection becomes more and more clear, more and more constant. And its influence stays with you even in the midst of your activity. And the silence of the mind is a force multiplier. Because when you think, all your mind energy is concentrated on the single thought that you're thinking, tremendously amplifying the power of the thought. Its incisiveness, it's deeper perception, insight, and even when you speak, the power of the speech is amplified. That's one of the things Mother refers to in this Tapasya of Knowledge. So you see, the process itself, culminating in inner silence, does not need long meditations for years if it is approached in this way of opening our mind to the peace already present. I remember I was doing a retreat in Switzerland with a group of yoga teachers. They were all teachers for 20 or 30 years. And we did this exercise as part of other things. And afterwards somebody came to me and said, I'm a Tai Chi expert, he said, and I used to practice every day 1.5 hours. And at the end of that 1.5 hours of intense concentrated practice, I would begin to feel this dense presence of the aura, presence of the peace, and so on. We led it to something a little further than this. And here, we just went up,
Her
we came down
specialty
and pop,
is
I had
speed.
it took just a few minutes. For him it was such a great surprise. In fact, this is true. Most of the intense, strenuous exercises are
Snake-style
designed
kung
to
fu
get us to the
focuses
state
on attacking
eventually.
vulnerable vital areas
But by
like
a
the
process
eyes,
more
groin, and
physically
joints for
accessible,
maximum debilitation.
but therefore also more laborious and extensive. Whereas this psychological process, especially one of opening directly to the divine, invoking the experience itself, takes you straight there. And it is this approach which is the general approach in the integral yoga for all spiritual training and development, which is why it makes it so much easier. Sri Aurobindo has a very interesting way of describing the approach of the integral yoga in terms of ease or difficulty. Because you will keep hearing people say that it's difficult and very difficult. And yes, what's difficult is the ultimate goal of the yoga, which is transformation of the body itself. That's very difficult. It's never been done before. But Sri Aurobindo explains, although the most difficult yoga in terms of its objectives, it is the easiest yoga in terms of what you gain for the effort that you put in it. Given this much effort, what you have gained is far more compared to conventional processes and conventional systems of yoga. And that's why you'll find in most of his text of the synthesis of yoga, he does not focus so much on techniques. He describes experiences and the passage through which the experience is realized, and from that experience the next experience, and so on. And the whole articulation of the experience coming from his own living experience has the power of the word. It conveys the experience to you. So if you can read it in this way and practice in this way, you will find the book leads you step by step, deeper and deeper into experiences. Of course, any experience you have, you should always accept it's the first step into this experience. And then there are layers and deeper dimensions, depths of the experience which will unfold also over time. But the fact that we make the first contact and we have the touch of the experience is itself a great help. Because now you feel it and you feel the value of it and you know it's within your reach, you know what it is. It's not chasing an imagination or a fantasy. So we have experienced a touch of the peace and the silence that it brings naturally. And there are deeper dimensions and intensities to this peace, sometimes so intense that you will feel almost as if an ocean is pouring into you. Rock solid in intensity, steel-like within the nerves. And such intensities also you will experience, and it comes quite rapidly when we persist. From the point of view of the bhakta, for the heart's relationship with the divine, it is useful to know that this peace which is descending is itself the substance of the mother's peace. It is her body, it is her consciousness, it is her peace that settles in you. It is she who pours herself into you. And if you relate to this peace and the presence in this way, as a personal relationship, with love, with gratitude, with with the surrender, with the heart of a child, then the reception is easier, the call also draws a response faster. But you must work consciously to widen yourself. The error many people make in this attitude of the child is they remain always the narrow little child and put more and more of the burden on the divine. But this child is meant to grow up. She is suckling you, nourishing you, but you're meant to grow, you're meant to participate in the experience. And there has to be an effort on your part to widen, to receive, to hold, to contain, to deepen, and so on. So this is a brief approach to the direct experience of the silence and the peace. Perhaps before we proceed with other things, I will pause here and invite any questions if you had any difficulties or anything you want to ask.
I have a two-part question. How do you differentiate thoughtless mind and silent mind? And when we go in the silent mind, we go into the sleep mode. What we do in that case?
Did you find yourself sleeping?
Yes.
Were you aware that you were sleeping?
Yes. Not really.
When did you come out when I said to come out? Did you open your eyes when I said to open your eyes?
Okay. Yes, slowly.
Okay. So the first thing you realize, it is not normal sleep. It is a state in which your awareness is so different that you do not know what to call it, so by association we associate with sleep. Because I am not conscious in the conventional way of being aware through my senses. But I am aware of a pure awareness, of a silence and a stillness. Mother explains that when the body especially is not used to this state of stillness or silence, it thinks, oh, this is sleep, so I need to go to sleep. And it even tries to go to sleep. But that's when you have to resist and just maintain the awareness, refusing to go to sleep. I would suggest you could do the exercise with eyes open or half open to prevent this kind of a thing. So when you have a half open gaze, you know you're not asleep because you're seeing and you're aware. It keeps you a reference point to an external sensory attention. But as such, it is not sleep, it is a kind of an inward state which one is not used to at first. But when you do this, within a week normally, you will find that you don't feel sleepy anymore.